Hi there. Thanks for joining us on Let's Talk Taste with Sherry, where we're saving the earth one flavor at a time by gathering community to share wisdom around the natural connections between our innate sense of taste and flavors that are grown in healthy regenerative soils. Welcome. Hey there. Welcome to another episode of Let's Talk Taste with Sherry, saving the earth one flavor at a time. I'm your host, Sherry Hess, and I'm super excited to have my first guest of the year. And it's so perfectly timed. Springtime, we're getting a little bit of a tease of warm weather here in Colorado, and everybody's thinking about gardening and planting seeds and all the things that we've been kind of shall we say, steeping on over the winter. So I'm super excited to introduce to you Katrina Karczewski, and she is the founder of The Grateful Garden. Katrina, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me, Sherry. I'm so pleased to have this conversation with you today.
Oh my God, I'm so excited to have you. So all of you that have been listening to me, you know by now that the power of flavor shows up when we have the most life in our soils, which translates into the most life and flavor in our food, right? So what can be more powerful and more flavorful than having the food grown in your own yard, right? Right in your property, outside your door, grabbing something to take it to the kitchen and creating it. You can't get more flavorful than that, right? And we've talked about garden tomatoes and how they compare to grocery store tomatoes, and the flavor doesn't even come close. And, you know, I feel like people have this, you know, even if you don't have a backyard garden, you know, maybe you've bought something from a farmer's market, or you've likely had the experience of tasting the difference between these, right? So this correlation between flavor and nutrients is where I think we miss the boat. We can say, oh yeah, that tomato definitely tastes better, but we're still calling them both a tomato, right? We're like, oh, here's a tomato and here's a tomato, but they're so different, right? In nutrients and in flavor. So I think that, you know, what you're doing, especially here in Colorado, where soils are not really easy to grow in, is super powerful. So why don't you give us a little bit of your background? How did you get started? Oh, and BTW, we're both Jersey girls, and Jersey is the garden state. So I love that that's our foundation. So share a little bit of your story with us.
Sherry, thank you so much. I'm just so absolutely pleased. You know, what they say about us Jersey girls are true, you know, a little bit fiery, a little bit feisty, maybe a little bit less filter than some people. So I apologize in advance.
I love it.
But my story, you know, it's really fun. I love a great origin story, and, you know, it's never just one thing, right? So my pop had a farm in New Jersey, and it was just really fun to have that foundation growing up. We lived with him for a few years, and then in our own home, we had a garden, and I grew up with that. And then, as you do when you get older and you go to college, you just, you know, you branch out and you do all these different things and try to be a completely different person than who you grew up as. And it's really fun how things kind of come back full circle. And so when I became a homeowner in Denver, Colorado, I think, 12, 13 years ago now.
That's exactly when I moved here.
Oh, fantastic. See, we migrated together. I really enjoyed the idea of literally putting roots down into my own piece of earth, my own patch of soil, and growing something. And that was really my first investment in my home was my raised bed kitchen garden and my compost system. And there's just something so ancient about growing your own food in the place that you live. And, you know, I'd love to, you know, just really talk about how that morphed into, you know, me coming to where I am today, where I get to be your garden coach. I get to teach you how to grow food. I get to help you through this growing curve that you're going to have. And what's really interesting to me is that, like, I became the person that I wish younger me had access to. Yeah. You know, I became that person that, you know, you can go to when you have these questions, because Colorado, gosh, oh my gosh, is so different than the Garden State. We're
It is.
we're a desert. We don't actually have soil. We have clay. It's too
And yet we have all
sunny and
this
too
sunshine.
hot and then too cold. I mean, it's a whole thing. So I'm really pleased that I get to, share my passion with everyone about it.
Well, I think it's fantastic. And you're right. Like, a lot of people might not realize if you don't live here, you really don't have this idea of the challenges that you have as a gardener here. We have a fairly short growing season. Hail is a real thing almost every single growing season, right? Like there's so much. But even just starting with the soil, like that's a really complex thing, and I've lived in 2 homes since I've been here in Colorado. And I've had gardens at both homes, and it takes work. It takes work if you want to do it on your own to really build the soil to give you the healthy, strong, flavorful plants. And I think there's been this growing desire for people through the pandemic, right? When we start witnessing food scarcity, when you walk in and you're like, why is there no produce here? Is it COVID? Is it trucks? Is it like, there's so many things we're just questioning. And at the same time, there is power. Like when I really think about it, I don't really let food scarcity around the pandemic, at least, become something that I think is too real, because we can, right? We can all make efforts to grow food. And at the same time, it's not always easy. It's not always like you just throw seeds, like in New Jersey. Like I literally wrote about this. You can just throw a seed in the ground and it'll grow. We don't have irrigation in New Jersey. We have rain, right? Like there's so many things. The soil is much more rich just to start with in New Jersey. Yeah. So here in Colorado, it's a little bit more of a challenge, and yet it's still an accessible thing, right? Yeah. Like it's I always say when this whole idea of flavor being our guide for nutrition, again, just even if you just grew culinary herbs, right? Like the difference in what that flavor can bring to your dish versus, oh, bless you, my dear.
Of course that happened.
Yeah, so I so love what you're doing. So tell me a little bit about your thoughts as a gardener, as someone who is helping as a consultant, right? Seeing the challenge of what people face when they're gardening. Do you have any stories around flavor? Like any of your clients or your own stories or client stories that have really shown up in the realm of flavor with what you're helping them with?
Yeah, so I would absolutely love to talk about that. The conversation about flavor is just my favorite part about growing your own food. A lot of the people that I meet, they aren't people who are already gardening or have even thought about it. They're a lot of times they're actually people who like just even tell me, not only do I kill every plant that I've gotten, but I don't even like fruits or vegetables, like they're just not good, right? Like I don't crave a salad. I don't put tomatoes. Tomatoes are gross. And I'm just like, that's like saying, I mean, it's like saying that like you just haven't experienced it yet. That's what that tells me, that you haven't experienced something that comes straight from a farm. And the flavor that comes from when you have your own environment in your own yard and you have that perfect soil. We do raised bed kitchen gardening in my company because then we can really control that soil health. And the clay doesn't just eat up all the nutrients and quicksand it all away, right? So we really focus on the fact that the system that we create is kind of like a, plug and play for you. You just get to harvest these delicious foods. And all of a sudden you're going to say like, oh my gosh, like I didn't like anything that wasn't brown and yellow, but now I'm adding this, green, and the spinach actually has flavor, and my salad is just so amazing. And it's when you go to those higher end restaurants, when you go to those places and you have this just like gorgeous, like beet salad with all of these things, that flavor is because they're most likely, sourcing it from local farms and having these just really high quality products that we're not getting the generic stuff in stores. And even your organic and locally grown things, they still have to be an agriculture version of the food, which means it has to be able to withstand the trucking and the shelf life. And then for you to then bring it home and let it sit in your fridge for 2 weeks before you throw out your salad, right? And so being able to just pick pieces from your garden fresh the day that you pick it is the day that it's going to have the most flavor, the most nutrition. It's the most alive. When you're eating a plant that is the most alive, it's going to have so much more of all of that, right? And you just aren't going to get that from something that you buy from even, a fantastic store in your community that may be sourcing these things, because it still has been a couple of days old, right? And so that's why that kitchen garden part is great. So my clients, we start off small. We start off where you're at. We start off with what you already like, but then we're gonna, as you continue to grow your skills and your confidence as a gardener, because Grateful Garden LLC, we grow gardeners, not just gardens.
I love that.
And
because we need to be seeded, we need to be nurtured, we need to be fed and watered and loved.
Yeah, absolutely. And
that's awesome.
And so when you get that freshest of the fresh and that crispiest of the crisp, and you realize that your salad's not supposed to be limp, it's supposed to be full of just this vibrancy, this color, this flavor, this stuff, it's I think it's what people are surprised most about. The thing I hear is like, I didn't think I liked X.
Right.
Then I grew it.
Right.
Great.
That's such a perfect flavor story, because that's the truth, right? And part of what I love your focus. I love your focus on raised beds in Colorado, because that makes you're setting them up for success by bringing in all the healthy soils from the get-go, right? And I love that you're focused on the culinary aspect, right? You're not a landscaper. You're not you're not trying to do what everyone else in Colorado tries to do as far as landscaping and, figuring out how to grow the greenest grass. Like I think we're maturing around that concept, right? And really recognizing, if we're going to be watering things here in Colorado and using the very limited and less water that we have, it should be food, right? Not green grass.
Food, not lawn.
So I love that you can, you're kind of contributing to that. And at one point we were having a conversation and I mentioned backyard garden, and you were like, not just backyard or front yard, like if an HOA allows it. And I feel like those conversations are really important to be having, around the conservation of water as well, because that's another thing. That's a really, really important thing. But, as far as your clients recognizing this flavor and having these ahas, it's so powerful. And what I love about that, and this is the thread of what I always talk about, is, our innate ability to detect nutrition. We are born with a tool to detect nutrition. What is that tool, Sherry? That tool is your taste buds, your senses, your sense of smell and your taste working together, right? So, and the whole purpose of being a living, existing human on the planet is to work in conjunction with the planet and to feed and fuel each other. And, and as humans, yes, we're growing food and consuming the food, but then, to keep the soils rich, we're putting the waste and the dead products back into it, and we're composting and creating this life cycle. So our taste buds are really there to connect us to the planet. Like, it is why we have them, right? So what you're doing is enlightening people to that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And we could, I'm sure, talk about this for hours and hours and hours, because there's so many things that you say that just light up a fire inside of me. Connecting us to the planet, right? That connection is so incredibly important to me, because food is and can be so, it's ancient, it's spiritual, it's this thing where when you connect to it, when you connect to your source of food, but when you also share that with your family and your friends, and you have that fellowship around food, it's just so powerful. So I'd love to ask you, Sherry, what is a memory you have, a younger you memory in one of your first gardens, about a food that you liked to eat?
Oh, I love that question. It takes me immediately to, we had a giant, like a really big garden in our backyard in New Jersey. My dad was a farmer, and not at the time, but in his younger years, he was a farmer. But we had this giant garden, and we had carrots and tomatoes and green beans and onions. And but one of my fondest memories is actually the carrots. The carrots were huge. Again, we just threw seeds in the garden, right? There was no, I mean, maybe there was fertilizer as a young kid, I don't remember, but it was the soil of New Jersey, right? And we had giant carrots, and like my dog would dig them up and eat them like a bone. And I'm always like, I think back to that, I'm like, there's got to be some kind of an innate, message in him too, like, this is really good, I'm going to chew on this carrot. We had so carrots is one, rhubarb is another. It was this weird plant that would come back every year, and it was kind of pink and green and leafy, but it was super sour, and this is weird. It's like sour celery, right? That was another thing that I don't see rhubarb a lot, except for friends that I know that garden.
Right.
Another one was the mulberry tree. Like, it was the tree that we had our fort in, and the mulberries would fall, right? And they were really just kind of messy, but God, I wish I had a mulberry tree now. Like things that you take for granted, right? So there's lots of really cool. We had canned everything, like we canned tomatoes, right? So I remember my basement we had jars and jars of stewed tomatoes, and again, as a kid, ew, stewed tomatoes. Right. But this is the food that we took for granted, and and the stuff that has changed so much. I actually just wrote a little piece yesterday, just a little piece on my own, for my own sake. Sometimes it's just writing is my therapy. And I recognize that, something that's happening in this day and age for people like that maybe have children and they're trying to feed their children broccoli or cauliflower or lettuce from the grocery store, right? Because this is where most of us have access, is the grocery store, and this is where we go. And in our minds, we know vegetables are good for our kids. And the kids are like, not interested. You have to put ranch on it to get them to eat it. And I started thinking, as much as food has changed just in our generation, I don't know how old you are, but like in the last 4 decades, right? Like, food has changed a lot, and the food is not as flavorful. It's when commercial agriculture has affected our soils. It's like you said, now food is grown for yield and shelf life and all these things, and flavor and nutrition are not a priority because it creates a more fragile thing, right? Well, the more fragile it is, the more delicious and nutritious it is. But my point is, there's no frame of reference to remember. If you haven't experienced it, you can't teach a kid that a carrot used to taste like this.
Right.
There's no taste history, right? There's no way to like go taste what a tomato used to taste like. And that's really sad. And it kind of created this huge impetus for me to be like, okay, like we almost need to bring it back as this revelation to current generations. That this is what food is supposed to taste like, because we've gotten so far from it, right?
Yeah. And so what I love about what I do is these stories, especially around, the children, because, what we offer isn't just, designing and installing your awesome gardens. It's also coaching you through that. Or if you already have a garden, coaching you through that. And so one of my coaching clients, when she was trying to explain to her partner, like, yeah, we're gonna build these gardens and it's going to be great. And the partner was like, but we don't eat vegetables and it's gross and our kids aren't going to eat them. And like, why would we do that? The day that their children ran out to the garden and picked food off of it and instinctively ate it and went back for more was the day that he was sold on it too. It's because there's a knowing inside of us, even as children. And it's so funny because they are little sponges with no filter, right? And they call a spade and you can't unteach them to like not, be that filter in that first, at 3 and 4 and 5 years old. It's only as they get older, they start closing that part off of themselves. And so when you see these 3 and 4 and 5 year olds, like just like going through the garden and eating all these fresh foods, that they are letting that flavor lead them. They're
Yeah.
not letting like, some sort of commercial or TV show or marketing lead them, right? They're not being marketed to like eat these vegetables. They're
Right.
just, there's that knowing. And so that to me is just like, it just blows people's minds when they're like, oh my gosh, my kids just willingly eat these. Like, yeah, because it tastes good.
I love that. I so love that. And part of exposing kids to these fresh grown vegetables too. And I love, I'm all on board with teaching kids, putting them in, put seeds, right? Grow the seeds. I remember as a kid, like putting green bean seeds in a like clear plastic cup, and you could see the roots forming and see the sprouts. Like that's really, really powerful for
Really
kids.
powerful.
But the other part that I love about that is that by exposing them to these flavors, to exposing them to real flavors that are grown and raised right in their backyard, they're getting that wider variety of salty, sweet, sour, bitter, and umami as it's being grown into it, right? So their taste buds are able to experience more variety, maybe a little bit more bitter than they would, but when it's grown with the bitter along with everything else, it's more palatable, right? And that's part of what this live event that I'm going to be doing, this weekend is really to kind of re-engage people back into recognizing these categories of flavor and the nutrients that should be behind it. So what's interesting to me, and what other people don't even recognize really, is how soil and conditions in the garden really affect flavor, right? And I know you have a little bit of a story around kale and the flavor of kale. So share with us a little bit about that. Like what happens in a garden that can change the flavor profile and hence the nutrient qualities.
And so this brings up a really big conversation about the prejudice we have around foods, right? So first off, we automatically think like, ew, veggies, right? Because if your flavor story, if you were never exposed to growing your own food, and if your flavor story is only a supermarket shelf flavor, you're not going to have these, profiles for you in your memory to go back to and how something's supposed to taste. And so one of the other prejudices about foods we have is that we go and we look for the most perfect food, right? Because we were taught by agriculture that it needed to be the exact right shape of, apple to fit into this container. And so one of the things that I love about, let's talk about kale especially, is that let's say you're growing it and it gets attacked by something that eats it, and it puts some little holes in it. And your prejudice is to think like, oh, that has been damaged. Like that is gross. I don't want to eat that. Something else already started eating that. I'm going to toss that out. Right. Or hopefully, if you are in my realm, we're going to be composting that. But really, I'm encouraging people that the holier the kale is, that the more antioxidants it's going to provide, because these plants, they have this system inside of them to protect themselves, to repel these bugs and pests, right? And that repelling is releasing all of these, pheromones and hormones and tannins and antioxidants, and they're changing that. The plant itself is changing its own flavor profile to repel that animal or that pest from continuing to eat it so that it can survive. And so when you see that in your garden, I totally encourage you to just wash it off and eat it, because that's giving you so many more nutrients, so many more profiles than you could ever even imagine. Because, people and plants, we grow with adversity, right?
Yeah.
We become stronger with adversity, and plants are the exact same way, and they become more rich and more dense in these nutrients. And if it ends up, if you are like, ooh, but that's like a little too bitter for me or whatever, like throw it in your smoothie with fruits and like really get the benefit of all of that, because it's just so powerful that that plant repelled this pest. It released all these things that made it better for us, better for it.
Or medicine.
Yeah.
right? If it's medicine for the plant, it's medicine for us,
Yeah.
right? Yeah. I love that. I so love everything about that. And I love that you also added, if you don't want to eat it straight up, throw it in a smoothie, because what that speaks to is how we can, continue to learn how the other categories of flavor can help bitter be more palatable, right? So we still get the benefits, but we're throwing in some fruit, we're throwing in some other living flavors that will, bring in some other elements of nutrition and also help to, kind of ease the bitterness of that power packed antioxidants and tannins, which show up as bitter flavors. I swear bitter flavors is the answer to all of our health problems, and it's really, really it's important to know that. And I love the idea of insects creating the plant. Like, there's so much wisdom in nature, right? So much wisdom in nature that we will probably never fully comprehend
Right.
in our lifetimes. And like, we just need to keep learning from that. So it's such a beautiful thing. I love that story. It's a perfect share. It's a perfect, Ron and I always say, my guests completely justify my existence. And you have done that for me as well. So let's just kind of wrap up here with, tell us exactly what you do, Katrina, because I think that there's a lot of power in your offerings, especially here in Colorado, where it's not always easy to just, dig up some dirt and throw some seeds in the ground like it was in New Jersey. So tell us a little bit more about, how do you come in, work with the clients, what your
Yeah.
offerings are. I think it's a great thing for us to know here.
Yeah. Thank you so much for allowing, this space where we can talk about just the things we're passionate about. I want to be able to do this with you and with anyone who is interested. So again, my name's Katrina. I am the founder of Grateful Garden, LLC. And I want to point out that that's a singular Grateful Garden, because this is about your garden. This is not about all the gardens. This is for me and you to one-on-one focus on your garden, on what you're going to grow. And so you can find me at gratefulgardenllc.com. And what we really do is we offer two main things. The first one is, you do not have a garden. And so I'm going to come into your space. I'm going to design a garden for you. We're going to do all of the things that's going to set you up for success. If you feel like I've killed every single plant that I've ever, had, I'm going to actually let you know that it's not your fault. It is not your fault that those plants died, that produce, that plant that you bought from a big box retailer that you're trying to grow. It's not your fault. Those places are not garden places. They are big box retailers selling the same thing all across the country, regardless of season, regardless of soil, and they're so generic. And so what my job really is to do is to set you up for success. We're going to put our garden, in a design that works for your space, in the right spot, to give it the best, ability to live and grow. And we're going to give you, the best soil blends and the best practices and the best plants and the best starts and the best of everything, so that you can confidently, within just a few weeks of our consultation, design, and installation, call yourself a gardener. You're not going to have to wait years and years and years of trial and error. And yeah, you're going to learn a lot, and you're going to, make mistakes, but I'm going to be there coaching you along the way. So my first offering is that initial consultation and design. And then the second offering is coaching. So for everyone else, for those of you who have allowed me to build your gardens and build you up as a gardener, but also for everyone who's on that gardening journey already, and you just feel stuck and you just feel like, you need something else to help level you up. This is the thing, is that gardening is your hobby, but it's my career and my job and my passion. And so I'm going to coach you through absolutely everything that you need to make you get to that next level, and to really inspire you to try something new in your garden that you've never had before. Last year was the first time I got to try ground cherries in my garden. And it's a plant that looks like a tomatillo. It's a little tomato and it's yellow. And the first time I put it in my mouth, I almost spit it back out, because I was like, what in the heck is this? The flavor is like a pineapple. And
Wow.
it's crazy and it's flavorful. But then I thought, okay, this is great. And I ended up eating them all one by one, I thought I was going to have enough to make an ice cream or can it or something. And they didn't last that long because it's just that flavor and trying something new. You know, I want to be with you throughout your journey for all of that. So you can get a hold of me. I really encourage every single one of you to start with a free consultation call. Make sure we're the right fit. Make sure that we're going to start this journey together, because it's really important for me to make sure that we're connecting yourself to yourself. We're connecting yourself to that literal piece of dirt that's underneath of your feet that you inhabit, and that we're connecting you to your community. When you have the abundance in these harvests and all this food, you're going to find yourself offering it to a neighbor that you may have lived next to for years and never talked to. And that sharing and that community is just really what we're all about building. And so I'm just absolutely pleased, Sherry, to be a part of yours now as well.
Oh, I love it. I'm so happy to have you as well. I mean, it's just a perfect fit. And, you know, when I first started this message and really wanted to talk about, you know, the importance of local foods. I mean, when I went to culinary school, the focus was local food, right? And we have in Colorado, you know, we keep kind of talking about the challenges of growing, but we also have really some amazing regenerative farmland up in like the Boulder areas and stuff. There really are some really amazing farms here as well. You know, I'd say it's probably a little bit more challenging, you know, those of us that live in the suburbs and have these houses that are plopped on top of this clay land, it's definitely more challenging, right, than some of the farmland. So there are some amazing farms and farmers markets in Colorado as well. So I just wanted to kind of throw that out there. But I think what you're doing and what you're offering is so powerful. And you know, we didn't really go into this, but I know based on conversations we had before, you know, like we're both passionate about, you know, also extending this into the communities that don't have access to it, right? Talking about urban gardening or this produce share thing, right? There's some organizations out there that are also helping. You know, if you start a garden and all of a sudden you have all this abundance, you can't eat all the zucchini. I mean, I think we had 50 zucchinis on one plant last year, right? Like there are services that will help bring that to these communities that don't have it. And that's part of it too, right? Because there are people that don't even have access to produce, let alone like their grocery store is a 7-Eleven or something, right? So it's something we just need to be aware of, you know, in the bigger picture and you know, and in the eyes of, you know, a lot of us are privileged to be able to have a lot of the things that we do. So I know that's a passion for you as well, right? To kind of share it out into community
It's
and
a huge
create
passion
this
of mine.
space.
Absolutely. And you actually brought up something that I'm not even sure we really went over before, but the farmers market aspect. So Grateful Garden LLC is managing the Green Valley Ranch Farmers Market now. And so if you are in Northeast Denver, come on out, say hello. It's going to be on Wednesdays, June through August, you know, in the summers. And, you know, if you want to be a part of it, if you want to be a vendor, or if you want to be, you know, just a part of our community, I'd love to meet you. I'd love to see you. I'd love to hear your stories.
I love it. I love it. What a perfect segue. Thank you so much, Katrina.
Yeah.
This has been my guest interviews are always the favorite part of what I do, because, you know, I always say I'm not the expert, and I love bringing experts in, you know, to justify my message and to get to know and to just, you know, build this community around flavor, because it's been my passion from the beginning. I love meeting people that see the thread of flavor and nutrients and soil, and gardening is just such a perfect segue to that. So thank you so much. This has been fantastic. We will be putting links to Grateful Garden LLC in the comments, and you know, you can click on her website, learn more about learn about Katrina's services, schedule that consultation, get it going. Now is the time of year, right? Let's
Totally
get it started. So awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Sherry.
Have a good one, everybody.